So I think Dune Awakening is going to give a section of the MMO community something they've been looking for quite a long time. And that's a new, somewhat high budget sandbox MMO. Now, if you've been following MMOs for a long time, you'll have realized that there has not been a lot of sandbox MMOs, and there's been even less sandbox MMOs that actually have a somewhat decent budget like a Funcom game would have. And if you're somebody that really wants a sandbox MMO, this is something that has been missing from MMOs for the better part of 2 decades. Pretty much ever since World of Warcraft came out, almost every new MMO has just tried to chase what World of Warcraft did. Chase that theme park MMO money, because that's a much more popular way to make an MMO. So the sandbox side of MMOs has been sorely neglected. But I do think Dune Awakening may fill some of this want, even though it is also a survival MMO, which I do actually think is going to work in its favor, because even when you go back to much older sandbox MMOs from before World of Warcraft or even around that same time, a lot of those sandbox style MMOs also have survival elements. And I know some people are probably going to be leaving a comment on this video that Dune Awakening isn't going to be an MMO, it's just going to be exactly like Conan Exiles. I've gone over this in another video, I'd recommend checking that out. With all of the information we have, Dune Awakening is going to be an MMO. It is going to be using some new tech that will allow them to have pretty large player counts in certain areas, while also allowing you to have permanent bases in the game. Now, how they're actually going to be doing this is the map is going to be split between 2 different areas. Every area in Dune Awakening is going to be meshed, which means once you go from, say, one zone to the next, it's a new server, but it's seamless transition between them. It's just hosted on a different server. This doesn't mean you're not going to be choosing like a main realm or server when you start the game. You're still going to be doing that, but all these different sections are going to be hosted on different servers, meaning you're splitting up that server load, allowing for higher player counts in certain areas. Now, the map itself is going to be split between 2 different areas, the Shield Wall area and the Deep Desert. The Shield Wall is going to be split between survival zones and hub zones. Hubs sound like they're going to be cities, probably not focused on actual combat. Those are looking to have caps of like 200 players in them, and then survival zones are looking to have 50 to 150 players, because survival zones are going to be where your permanent bases are, but they're going to be more PvE focused. Now, all of the Shield Wall zones, which are hubs and survival zones, are going to be meshed like we went over, but they're also going to be instanced, something like you would find in World of Warcraft. So if you try to go into a new zone, it's going to automatically put you into an instance that isn't filled. So if you've played retail World of Warcraft in the modern day, anytime you go into a new zone, it instances you to try to make sure that zone isn't too filled so you'll have a bad experience, but to also try to put you with other players in an instance of that zone so it's not empty. Similar thing is going to be happening here. But on the other side of the Dune Awakening map, you're going to have the Deep Desert. The Deep Desert is going to be the more PvP focused area. It's going to be split up into 9 different meshes or zones. Every single one of those is also going to be the size of Conan Exile. So you are definitely going to have the massive area size of MMOs. And every single one of those 9 zones is going to have a player cap of 500 people. You could actually have a battle of 500 people if everybody grouped up and fought. We'll probably still be laggy, but you could do it, which I think absolutely makes this an MMO. Now, something that's more unique with the Deep Desert is it's not going to be instance. So if you're in one zone and you try to go to the next, and the next zone is capped with 500 people, it's not going to let you go into that next zone. There'll probably be a queue, or it'll say come back later. Now, this is to keep everybody together so everybody could fight. You could see all of those different people on your overarching world, so you could actually get to know people, kind of like how old school MMOs had, or even how World of Warcraft used to have, kind of before all the instancing and servers being connected. So this has all been a long-winded way of saying this is going to be an MMO. But that begs the question, what are the sandbox elements going to be? Because one of the biggest factors of a sandbox MMO is just giving you freedom to do what you want and not putting you down a path to do something that the developers want you to do. Like if you compare to World of Warcraft, you're going to be leveling up, doing quests, doing dungeons. You're going to get to the end game, you're going to do PvP, dungeons, or raiding. You kind of have these set paths with set quests. You're primarily going about doing content made by the developers to be done in a specific way. But sandbox games build out a sandbox for you to play in and just put you in it and kind of give you the parameters of that, and then you get to go do whatever you want. And there's going to be a lot of these elements of Dune Awakening. One of the first ones being just allowing you to play the game how you want. This isn't exactly specific to sandbox games, but it's a pretty big element, and this is definitely going to be important in Dune Awakening. In fact, the developers have said that if you want to just be a crafter, you can do that. You don't have to go fight in PvP. You don't have to go fight anything. If you just want to be a crafter, you could do that. If you just want to be the architect that makes bases for yourself, for your clan, or turns them into blueprints and sells them on the player market, you could do that as well. You could be somebody that just builds the best bases on your overarching server, and you blueprint all those, and everybody knows who you are because you're doing that. You're making a bunch of money on the market doing that, and that could be the whole thing you do. You're just an architect. You just build bases and sell the blueprints for them. Or you could be somebody that really likes PvP, so you're spending most of your time in the deep desert zones with another group of players, going around trying to get those more valuable resources and finding all of the other players to fight. Or you could be somebody that just stays in the survival zones and just gathers all the materials there, so you don't have to PvP, and you're just always out there gathering materials, building bases, and you could sell all the materials on the market as well. Or you could just be somebody that just wants to follow the quest lines and the story that's going to be in Dune Awakening. So player choice, while not specific to sandbox games, is something that's very important to them, and is something that's going to be very important to Dune Awakening. Now, I think building is actually going to be a pretty big element of a sandbox game. Dune Awakening is going to have building, and Dune Awakening is also going to have what is basically permanent buildings. As I mentioned, in the survival zones, they're mostly PvE focused. So when you build there, you can basically have permanent bases. As long as you have a shield generator on in that base, you can't be raided. One of the big elements that the developers have talked about is not wanting there to be that element of you log off and you get raided and you lose all of your stuff. They didn't want to have a big focus on that gameplay element, but it's still going to be possible. We're not exactly sure how you're going to be able to raid other people, but you will be able to do it in some way. And being able to just raid another player's base and take all of their stuff and have the kind of drama or political intrigue based around that, maybe having a big guild raid another guild, that is definitely very sandbox. You can even expand past this, because once you get into the deep desert zone, there may still be building. Now, the deep desert zone is actually going to have a system where on a weekly basis, a big storm comes through and pretty much resets these zones. There's going to be some procedural generation with this, but they're going to fill in points of interest. Say a place you explored before is now filled with sand. It'll uncover new points of interest. So it'll change up all these zones and it'll wipe away all player buildings. Now, because this has actually been mentioned before, even though we haven't specifically been told you could build there, it does seem like you're going to be able to build in the deep desert zones. It's not going to be permanent. It's going to be wiped away every week. Being able to build these time-limited bases in the deep desert zone is going to add so much player-driven content and player-driven gameplay. And this is actually going to tie back, and this can actually tie back into some of the other elements. If you're a player that just likes building bases, maybe you could be good at building like a bunker that you can blueprint. Well, now, once your guild or somebody you sold this blueprint to goes into the deep desert zone, they can place down this bunker blueprint, have everybody put in the resources to get it all built up, and you could pretty much build up these like battle bases or bunkers in the deep desert zone that's going to be wiped away in a week and just have these massive battles. This isn't something that developers would have you go do or tell you could go do. It may even be something that the game doesn't necessarily want you to do because it's going to be wiped away in a week. But because it's going to be more sandbox, just give you the tools and just allow you to go do anything, this is definitely something you'll probably be seeing, which will probably be really cool if you're in these big battles. And even something like political intrigue is something that's going to be important for a sandbox game that you're definitely going to be having in Dune Awakening. You see this in a lot of the smaller server-based survival games where you'll hear of some guild being insided by somebody, someone that was in their group that was maybe there as a spy, or someone that just wanted to leave and join another group. So they inside somebody, they destroy their base or something, or they take all their resources, or just give information to another group to make raiding them more easily. There'll definitely be those elements. And you even see stuff like this in kind of a much larger scale in another sandbox MMO, EVE Online, that has this type of thing in spades. And because in Dune Awakening, you're going to have these bases that in some ways have the possibility of being raided, and you have this actual ownership of areas and bases, this type of political intrigue or spying between groups is something something that's possible and does definitely give that game a more of a sandbox player-driven feel. So when you add all of these elements together, I think Dune Awakening is going to be what a certain group of MMO players have been looking for quite a long time. Now I know some of these players also aren't going to like it because it is a survival game as well. It's gonna have a lot of those survival elements, and maybe they want something that's not a survival game but just an MMO sandbox without those survival elements. But I do think a lot of these players are gonna like a lot of the design choices they're going with Dune Awakening. And not only that, but I think they're adding in some more modern design that will also bring in a lot of other players that aren't necessarily there for sandbox elements. It's going to bring in survival players, going to bring in the MMO sandbox players, and I do think it's even going to bring in some other just more theme park MMO players, because they're still giving you the option to kind of stay on more of the PvE side of the game, being a builder, being a farmer, being somebody that just plays the market, being someone that just follows the quest lines and stories they're going to have in the game. So it does sound like there are going to be a lot of different elements for a lot of different players, but it's all going to be wrapped in under that sandbox design. But that's pretty much all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.